Welcome to the Infrastructure Oversight Board meeting for May 27th, 2021. Let's start with a flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, let's start with roll call.
Armin Avazian.
Present.
Walter Brennan Jr.
Present.
Maria Coronado.
Present.
Greg Jackson.
Present.
Vanessa Rochelle.
Present.
Tamala Takahashi. She's absent. And Jeff Vandervoort.
I'm here.
All right, moving to announcements.
Yes. Madam Chair, Hoon, before you start on the gas update, I had 4 quick ones for the IOB. The pending agenda item 4, which is the joint meeting with the Transportation Commission and the IOB to review responsibilities. I'm going to send out after the meeting next week links to you all that are to the council meetings that created the Transportation Commission and the IOB, so that could help spur on the conversation when we get there. The joint meeting is in the works, being planned by the Assistant Community Development Director, David Kriske, and I. So we will bring that forward to you, I would expect over the summer as we come out of the pandemic. 2, with us coming out of the pandemic and the pending, hopefully almost completely fully reopening on June 15th, this board will likely see preferential parking zone applications for your approval coming around Labor Day. So we're getting those going now that we're getting back to normal. 3rd, we are at staff, we are looking at the potential for the in-person meetings, and it would be great to finally actually meet all of you in person as opposed to the box. And I'll keep you posted on that after probably the next meeting when we know more after June 15th. And hopefully we will get through this, but I do have a hard stop at 7 myself. But if we're still going, then Mr. Hahn, I'm sure I'll leave you in his capable hands. And that's it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Berkman. I wanted to update the board on the project that the gas company's been working on for a while, the Verdugo and Reese project. It's good news. The project is complete and they're closing the project now. So just wanted to update the board on that. Yes. Oh.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. 2 quick questions. As you say, this is finally done. I'm able to turn out of my McDonald's onto Verdugo. They have repaved what they needed to do in a lovely way, perfectly, and striping also. There is a small section going west on Verdugo, and this is on the side of the street that has been repaved, that did not get painted because it was not repaved, maybe 150 feet or so going all the way to Parish. The striping for the crosswalks because of the high school are relatively new. And also, just in general, everything looks good. Does it make any sense, and this seems silly, but to ask our own staff to extend the new painting for the couple of lines that are needed to just make it at least all look good for one block?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's reasonable. And I believe actually the inspector, I think the traffic division, that's part of the closeout process that they are looking at. And if it's warranted, then I believe that they are going to be restriping that.
Thank you very much. And another quick question. when a job like this takes place, where the street was closed for 6 months or so, does the city receive any revenue for the use of the city property?
So basically, when you're saying revenue, I mean, the gas company has to pull what's known as an excavation permit. So the permit is based on the work that they are performing. I think this particular work was kind of unexpected, and gas company had some emergencies that they had to resolve, and they had to move off site because of that they had to take care of some other sites. I think the city, they felt that because of COVID, fortunately in the sense that there was lack of traffic, the school was closed, so they felt that they didn't have to tell the gas company to close the hole and then come back later. They felt that it wasn't a hazard. It was definitely a nuisance in the sense that it was, eyesore and I think access issues. But the permitting division, they were actually working hand in hand with the gas company to make sure that they were going to perform the work that they said that they were going to do.
Madam Chair, if I may, Board Member Vanderboort, for every permit that the city issues, we have a fee schedule that's approved by resolution by the council, and we look at it, I believe, in Burbank annually. So all the costs for services, it's not a revenue producing application or fee, if you will. It's a cost to cover the services that are expected with the permit. And there's a time limit to the permit. So if they go over that, then there's another fee issued. So it's purely to cover the cost of services from the city to the applicant who is working in the street.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you for the information. You answered two of my questions with those announcements. Perfect. All right. So, Karina, do we have anyone waiting for public comment?
We have no one at this time.
Okay, perfect. Moving on to the consent calendar. We have the approval of the minutes.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Vanderboort. Yes.
I move for the approval of the minutes as submitted.
I second
Perfect.
that.
We have a motion and a second.
Second.
Let's call for a vote.
Armin Avazian?
Oh,
That was an approve?
yeah.
Okay. Walter Brennan Jr.,
Approved.
Maria Coronado,
Approved.
Greg Jackson,
Approve.
Vanessa Rochelle. Was that an approve? Yes, okay. I think we're having some audio issues, but yes, that was an approve. And then Tamala Takahashi, she's currently absent. And Jeff Vanderboort.
Approved.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. Moving on to reports to the board. Looks like we have the unfunded project list development of capital projects coming up.
Yes. Before I turn it over to Mr. Hahn, Madam Chair and board members. So this was a recent request to bring this before the board. You may recall over the past year when we really were focusing on preparing our prioritization methodology for our program and developing our program, I mentioned our plan at staff. We were always planning to get the departments to review this, as you see, large list of projects, see what they, if any, want to really focus on and move forward, identify a champion or a project manager to shepherd this through, put them forward into the program for prioritization for those they would like to get done. After we've completed this prioritization process and developed our first prioritized capital program, which you've done, and I'm glad, appreciate your efforts. And Tuesday night, the council approved the budget, including our capital program. So that's good news for all of us. And kind of to set the table, I guess, with Hoon's presentation, we're very interested in your comments. Maybe there are things that catch your eye. And I believe, given Ms. Takahashi's absence, we will have this agenda item in the June meeting too. So with that introduction, Mr. Hahn?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Berkman. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Hoon Han. I am the Capital Projects Program Manager. Tonight, I'd like to share with you the current unfunded project list and also the capital project development process. The capital project development process consists of 3 phases. You have the planning and budgeting phase, which is part of the budget process that we completed, like Director Berkman stated. And also there's design and then ultimately construction and the project delivery, the end goal. This is the schedule that we actually followed this past budget process. So we probably most likely will mirror this schedule next year also. And as the project develops and IOB, we bring the capital projects to you for your comments. This is the chart that shows the breakdown of the total unfunded project estimate based on divisions and departments. And as you can see, we have a little bit over $500 million of projects that's been basically unfunded. The unfunded project list actually was first created in 2013 as part of the 13-14 budget process. And that's when it was first developed. The unfunded project list is a dynamic list. Each year, the list is reevaluated to determine if projects should fall off the list and if new projects should be added. Each department is responsible for reviewing the unfunded project list. And I'd like the board to recall that after the facilities conditions assessment is completed, a new facilities capital improvement program will be developed and managed outside of this list of projects. So that's just a kind of a reminder that that's something that's ongoing and being developed. As you can see, this is the existing assets for streets. We have also storm drains, the parks projects. I know I'm going through a little bit fast, but I think you've had a chance to review it. And the parks also, the total here, and the facilities, oops. Sorry. As far as the facilities, I wanted to highlight the Central Library. This is the project that you actually approved, recommended for approval to council. That's the Central Library Phase 2 that we actually budgeted $150,000 to kind of keep the momentum going with the assessment study that was completed. Oops. And then you have the new assets, identifies the Metrolink double track. And as you can see, we have an estimate about $6.6 million of funds that the city will come up with, but the total project budget is over $200 million that Metrolink is actually, or Metro is coming up with. Yeah, additional parks projects where they have new soccer fields that they would like to develop. And also for facilities, I believe one of the things that they may want to try to get identified is the new EOC, which may get incorporated part of the new Civic Center, but that obviously hasn't been determined at this time. So the first steps of the project is to basically the budget when the project gets developed. And the first thing that you have to think about is what do you want to do? So identifying the scope of the projects, and that's during the budget. How can we get it done? We need to identify the resource. Can we actually deliver the project within this given fiscal year that we're requesting the funds? And then also how much will it cost? So we identify and come up with the estimate of the total project budget, which includes design, construction costs, and also any regulatory permitting fees or just any fees that's associated with the project that we would have to try to identify and then put an estimate together and then request the budget. That's just the whole the budget process. So as far as the coordination during the design and construction, So in late June, we will be having a capital projects kickoff meeting for the fiscal year 21-22 with all the project managers. So this is something that Mr. Berkman is establishing this year. So this is the first time we're actually having a meeting that will kind of coordinate and do a kickoff meeting for this coming fiscal year, so that the goal is to basically bring all the project managers, assign projects, and also to kind of go over what the expectation is and try to establish some schedules prior to, and then that we could actually hold the project managers accountable during the delivery of the project. After the projects actually have been assigned, each project manager will have their own project kickoff meeting. And that's after they actually secure a consultant. And as part of the kickoff meeting, this would be where you establish what's known as a project development team. So the project development team will consist of obviously the project manager, the client, which could be internal clients, obviously, and also with any stakeholders that may have a stake in the project, which could be internal, external. So we would definitely identify that and establish that team and set a regular meeting to update the projects, and also just having a regular meeting as a team. Then you hold everyone more accountable through the process of project delivery. And then after the design starts, the design gets completed, and then when a PSNE plan specs and estimates will be put together and bid out, and then it will go to construction, and basically the project will go to construction and get delivered based on the delivery method the project will go through. Oh, yes. And that concludes my presentation. And we have staff here to answer any project-specific questions on the unfunded project list. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for that. I had a chance to read through it myself. I have a few questions, but I'd like to open it up for questions from any other board members. Mr. Avazian, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Hahn, for the presentation. I have a few questions, but I'll try to ask a couple of them and give the opportunity to other board members to come up, and then if they don't have the rest of my questions, I'll again raise my hand. One of my major concern about this list is, I know we talked about the payment management program and how our PCI is low compared to the cities around us, and you had a plan for next 10 years to maintain our streets, do more resurfacing, slurry seal, all the payment management program recommendations to increase our PCI. And in that report, I remember we had a big portion that was unfunded. I don't see payment management program in this list.
Yes, the reason that's not on the list is because the payment management program is funded every year. So it's not part of the unfunded because we know it's going to get funded. I think there's a commitment of $8 million every year for the payment management program and the sidewalk program.
But from where I remember, that $8 million, sorry, Mr. Beckman, the $8 million was not enough to meet our goal, or it was?
Board member Avazian, I have some great news because I've shared that at our CIP presentation to the board and to the council in April, and we are completing our latest version of the payment management program report with our consultant, and without the alleys, we are at a PCI of 68, which surpasses by 3 the 65 that was our goal. I think it was about 5 years ago. So there has been actually a tremendous success that I'm happy to let you know about the pavement, and recently we're doubling our, we used to have 20 sections, and now we're going to have 5 sections. So we're going to be on a 5-year program to hit the entire city. And as you know, with the improved pavement conditions, we will be able to get into more of a maintenance mode and start incorporating some slurry where we can. We're going to start addressing probably a few alleys where we can that are in the worst shape. We want a most efficient use of the dollars is to hit where the most traffic and, let's say, most risk is. So of course we're hitting we have an arterial annual program and we have the residential annual program. So we're making great progress. Personally, I'll share with the board. I was talking with staff recently, and I think a goal that I'd like to see the consultant provide is to get us to about a 73. So the low 70s, in my experience, is a really good number to hit. So you have that right balance of proper investment and not too much, like exaggerated, you don't want gold plated streets. That's too much money to spend and not worth the maintenance, lack of maintenance. So good news on that point. And I'd like to add to Mr. Hahn's comment, we have master plans for all our infrastructure. And I know, member Vanderboort and I emailed, and who knows this too, that I was like, assets. I go, okay, I guess assets are fine. I think of infrastructure as infrastructure, but we have master plans for our roads and our sewers and our storm drains and all that. And that's not necessarily here per se, but they're definitely a program that we have for all of those.
Mr. Rickman, just when your payment management program final report is published, will we have a chance to take a look at the report?
Absolutely.
Or maybe, Madam Chair, if this is something that board can request, can we have staff present the report or the summary of report to us?
In the future agenda item, I think that's a good suggestion, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I got a question.
Mr. Brennan, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Burke. Mr. Mann, it's a lot of money. And I was wondering, other than the $8 million a year we're getting from the local taxes, it seemed like that 500 million is a lot of money. And where is it coming from? Maybe I forgot. Maybe you told us and I forgot. So remind me.
So it's not money that we have. This is a typical process that public agencies go through to see what has to be done to have the basis of.
No, that part I understand.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like, where are we getting the cash? That's all.
Well,
I realize it's going to be on a year-to-year basis and what's prioritized, and you've got a really good list there, I think. It's very comprehensive, and I like it. Just like, okay, well, how do we fund this over time? I presume there's some sort of 5-year program or 10-year program to catch funds here and there to help out.
So it is on an annual basis, and that's why we have the prioritization policy here, but also more importantly with the departments. So they'll take a look at this, our goal every year, and bring forward the ones that are the highest priority. There are those that could be brought up quicker due to the successful acquisition of grant funds.
Okay.
But you're exactly right. We don't have the money to do all these, and we continuously seek out with staff ways to get the funds to the critical infrastructure improvements that we need.
That's reasonable. Answer the question.
My pleasure.
All right, next up. Mr. Jackson, go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank staff for bringing this forward to us this evening. I have some questions. I'm a little bit confused. Mr. Hahn, you speak of project managers, and I understand that process to a degree. I assume you're speaking of project managers for the 15 or so projects that were just recently approved for funding in the 21-22 capital improvement program, right?
Right.
Okay, so there are not project managers for the 58 projects that are unfunded.
Correct.
Okay. How does the 58 or one of the 58 or three of the 58 unfunded projects move from that unfunded list to being recommended to the council for the 23-24 fiscal year for funding? What is the process that the city is going through on that?
So
Or are you not considering these for future funding?
well, those are actually for future funding. It's up to the individual departments to decide which projects that they want to champion and move forward with. And then, and like I said earlier, define the scope, define if they could actually deliver the project, and also if they could actually budget for it. If it's a $60 million project, then it's going to take years if they got to come up with grants or different things to see if they could actually fully fund the project. If they know that they can't fully fund it for this $60 million project, or even if it's $20 million project, then it may not be feasible to actually request that project the following fiscal year. But if they plan ahead and see how they could develop a funding program to be able to fund it in maybe 5 or 10 years, then I guess that's something that the department has to decide how they want to try to manage that part of it.
And that will happen in the next go around next January, February, or whatever?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Brennan and I'm sorry, Ken.
Mr. Jackson, I'd like to add, given that the board now has this list, Hoon and I will definitely be seeking your input as to what you think projects catch your eye and should maybe be, we can notify the departments that you're interested in these specific projects and see where they fall in their priorities, so we can make sure your voices are heard as well.
Okay, well, they all look worthy. Mr. Brennan and I, as I've mentioned previously, were on the school bond oversight committee. And in that case, there were a number of improvements that were needed for the different campuses. And there were dollar amounts that were initially put forward to the voters as how much they would cost. As we got into the process over the years, we found out that those numbers were a ballpark at best. Through no fault of the school staff, but they pulled numbers maybe a little bit better than out of their hats, but there wasn't a lot of methodology behind it. The numbers totally in the 537 million or whatever that's on this list. How accurate do you think they are for 2013 numbers? Because we now are 8 years later and there's been at least 13% inflation. So have you looked at these numbers again since 2013?
As far as the list, the 2013 was when they first created the list. So I think like I said, the project, it's a dynamic, it's a living document. So projects have fallen off and been added. So I'm not sure, I don't know which projects are from the original list, but as far as doing an estimate, like you said, it's when you don't have the design, it's really hard to do a hard estimate. So you do the best you can to identify the scope of the project and all the issues that you might run into, all the outside agencies that you may have to deal with, all the permitting you may have to deal with the regulatory agency. So you try to identify everything that you can, the full scope of it, and do the cost estimate and to a breakdown. So it is in some ways when you're doing the budget, it's kind of a best guess. But based on our expertise and our experience, we try to vet that out the best that we can and come up with the number that we could actually try to stand by. And obviously, there are unforeseen conditions sometimes that you didn't expect, but we try to capture that the best that we can and try to come up with the number. And ideally, my rule of thumb usually has been where if you could be within, I would say, because you don't want to under budget, you kind of want to over budget. And if you could hit about 15 to 20% mark, I would say that's a comfortable number. Obviously, you don't want to overestimate. And when it's a $2 million project and estimate $4 million and request $4 million, and then you only spend $2 million, then we're doing a very poor job of estimating. And then we don't want to estimate $1 million when it's actually a $2 million project, and we did a very bad job of estimating there too. So we try the best we can to try to hit the mark within a certain percentage range and be able to deliver the project based on that.
So before some of these 58 projects move forward, you folks will revisit the numbers.
Correct. So during the budget process, when we're doing the project, the forms that you saw, this budget process, there was an estimate. So we're going to try to refine that a little bit more too, where we will actually ask the project managers or the departments and the divisions who are coming up with the projects to give us a true, like a better breakdown of the cost estimate. So if they're going to pull out a project from the unfunded project list, they're not going to just use a number that's on the list. They have to do a real-time current estimate to make sure that we're getting requesting the accurate budget for the project.
Okay. One final question, Madam Chair. It's a little bit afield from our Proposition P, so I won't go too far, Ken. The federal government is considering an infrastructure relief bill. I hope you folks, with conjunction with the city manager, are keeping an eye on this. And the fact, it's obviously still rather preliminary, but should there be federal dollars rolling in, I sincerely hope Burbank can, file and seek funding for improvements, off this list and elsewhere.
Yes, if I may. Yes, Board Member Jackson, as Member Brennan noted, that is definitely something that we do. You see the price tags on these projects, they are hefty. So we need grant funding for many of them. And that's a great example of I each year kind of hold my breath with the federal politics, and they typically just do an amendment, do an extension. I can't remember the last time I saw a new one. There is the potential that will be done. Usually that is done around the federal fiscal year, which is September 30th is the end. So hopefully we see something around September, but we'll definitely be watching that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing this forward, and I'll shut up for the time being.
Mr. Vanderbort.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Hahn and Mr. Bergman, for the detailed presentation or the update of the list, and also to my colleagues for the questions that have already been asked that clarify the situation. I guess from my perspective, I would like us as a board to consider what can we gain from this presentation tonight, and how can we accomplish the big picture, which is how do we provide input or guidance quicker rather than or sooner rather than later. We were just told, Mr. Hahn said that there will be project managers meetings thanks to your leadership from your department in June to get them to revisit this list and probably, I imagine, pull forward some of the projects that they have both the capacity to do, possibly other funding, whatever is the right reason that they move forward. How do we get into this mix? And I don't mean elbowing our way into making more work for you guys, but how do we provide our input? Because, because you're nice enough to send all of this, it's easy for me to have made like maybe 10, 12 comments on the side of the spreadsheet. Some things that I see that are very important to start funding now, as we've already done, for example, for the library, to the extent that we can help with any funds. But, for me, for example, the continuation and completing the Chandler bike path is something that has been in my level of interest since before I was a council person, back in the early 2000s when staff was working on this. And by the time I was in the council, we were sure we were going to be able to complete that last quarter of a mile to get to Victory, and then eventually that other half a mile to get to the transit center. And there is some number there, as Mr. Hahn says, a budget holder of $4 million. that to me would be something that we should push and bring to the surface. But I can do that as well, by the way, with a half a dozen or 8 other items. And I think my colleagues can probably find reasons to also discuss other components. When can we do that? When should we do that? I don't want to start tonight if my colleagues don't feel comfortable. I certainly feel very comfortable asking a few more specific questions about this list and providing some input that perhaps my colleagues want to discuss, or should we hold off, and again, this is on the agenda, and to just note and file. But I don't feel that we should just note and file. I feel that we finally can, grab a hold of this, get our teeth into it, and provide some guidance, which is what we're here to do.
If I may, the meeting that you mentioned in June, it's actually not to discuss the unfunded projects list. It's actually to talk about the projects that's been funded for fiscal year 21-22.
Okay.
So that's a completely different reason for meeting. So it's something that we're doing for the first time this year with the leadership of Mr. Bergman. And so I think, as Mr. Bergman said earlier, during the budget process, I think that's probably the best time to actually talk about the individual projects that the board wishes for the departments to consider. And if you have those, then we could actually share that information with the individual departments and see how it may fit within their program that they're trying to put together. So I'm not sure if it would be the most beneficial to have that discussion now, but I think maybe in November or in the future when we're starting the budget process, it may be better for us to have that discussion at that time.
And through the chair, if I may, and thank you, Mr. Hahn. We're on the same page. Like I said, we will continue this item to June, and my suggestion is definitely to get your input, and I think that could happen as early as I think October, maybe even September, because I would like to hear. I don't know what percentage or how many projects could be of interest to the board, but I think I'd like to hear the consensus in the fall as to, we think these, I'm just going to throw it out there, these 5 or 8 projects are our top priorities that we'd like to see move forward, so we can have something to chat with the departments about as to what the Infrastructure Oversight Board's desires are, at least to start the conversation.
Okay, I would love to see us do that. I mean, I know, there is an item here on streets for existing assets to add flashers and signals, et cetera, to improve pedestrian crossings. And, I'm familiar with every one of the 9 that are listed. I know there are 11 noted, but there are only 9 listed, and I walk every one of them regularly. So I do see the value for safety purposes to try to make that bubble to the surface sooner rather than later, but only if my colleagues also concur. And perhaps of the 9 there's a couple that maybe are not as high a priority, but most of these are near schools, et cetera. And there are a couple that are intersections that are not there that I feel should be there. So that's the kind of input that I think our board should be providing. And perhaps because this is coming back on the agenda in June, we can have a preliminary discussion, if that's okay for you guys, and then bring it back in September to maybe create a prioritized little spreadsheet that says, here, the board feels strongly about these 5 items, 7 items, and then at least you have some input. It may or may not go anywhere, but at least it gives what we're supposed to do, which is to provide guidance and direction for these items.
Right, and before Board Member Avazian, if I may, Madam Chair, it's a great point to bring it back to why the prioritization methodology and that process is so critical, because I anticipate there will be plenty more projects that we would like to do than our finite resources are capable of delivering. So that's where you'll see this process go out, as we develop next year's budget for sure, because these projects will be out there along with our regular projects that we have to do. And, we have historically, I told council, and I think I told all of you in a presentation, we've averaged around, I think, 17 million for our capital budget the past 5 years outside of the pandemic downturn. And we have 18 million scheduled for this year. I think we can improve our project delivery process and our project managers' capabilities to deliver and increase that amount. But it's not going to cover many millions that we have to do. So that's where that prioritization process is going to come to light. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Avazian, you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Berkman, you answered almost 90% of my question. So the prioritization policy that we had for the projects, will you be able to rate all the projects in this list, or just you will pick few projects that you think are good candidates to move forward for the next fiscal year?
So it would only be for the projects that the departments want to push forward. So it's not for every single project on that unfunded list. So it's basically only projects that the department would like to move forward and try to get funding for that coming fiscal year. So I think with the help of the IOB, I think with your input in the future, when we're actually starting the budget process and with your interest in certain projects, we could definitely pass that on to the departments and see if they could actually incorporate that into their program, or if it's something that they weren't planning on doing it, the following fiscal year, but maybe they were considering it maybe 2 to 3 years down the line, and then we could pass that information on to you also.
Madam Chair, if I may suggest, maybe the board can come up with an internal prioritization of this list to come up with high, medium, low priority and advise that to the staff to consider for the next fiscal year.
I have to agree with you, Mr. Avazian. Sorry about that. I think we've heard a lot of comments at previous meetings about the frustration the board has with wanting to have more input in some of this. So I think, and we're a new board, so we're still trying to get the process down. Mr. Berkman's doing a great job. Staff's doing a great job. I think it would be good if we planned our calendar for next year based on that, so that we can take a good look at the projects on this list. Maybe we could, like you said, do high, medium, and low, and then push forward what we think would be a good priority for our city. And hopefully the projects or the departments would consider that. I think that would be good for us.
One more thing to add. When we saw the scoring, and I think the rest of the board members agree with me, I was personally expecting that I will see the scoring for all of these projects, and the high scores are going to the next year. And eventually, this is a very big list, and I don't think at this stage it's practical to sit down and score all these projects. So here, the board will help you to pick the projects that will, not just the board, but also the city council and the residents want to move forward, considering the public's feedback, the city council's feedback. With that said, we can come up with some recommendations to come up with more scoring on the project.
Yes, just
go ahead,
Madam Chair, just to address that. We appreciate that input. I think that would be helpful and could identify synergies between what the board wants and what the departments are considering going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vanderborg.
Just to piggyback on the comments and the conversation, that we might be able to do a two-dimensional or a two-sided spreadsheet that talks about what our priorities are, and then what within those priorities is feasible to accomplish within the next immediate short term. Because to talk about, spending $50 million for something that is not likely to happen in my lifetime, as wonderful as it is, and to confirm that it's a priority is one thing, but to recognize that we're not going to accomplish it is very different than putting ballers on San Fernando Road in downtown for $300,000, which if we all agree that it's a priority, we hopefully get staff behind and the council behind that as well. So I think it's both as a priority of as high, low, high, medium, and low interest, and then also feasibility of doing it high, medium, and low, and perhaps those match in a way that the staff can benefit from our prioritizing, which could be pie in the sky more often than not if we're not careful not to consider the realities of possibility of doing it or accomplishing it.
Agreed. Ms. Rochelle.
Personally, I'm always going to be in favor of projects that promote mobility and safety. That's just me being biased. But then again, maybe that's unfair to I see there's an animal shelter that's being looked at, a new location for the animal shelter, and that might be quite nice too. We could talk about that, I guess, at the next meeting. But I just wanted to say the nice work on Hollywood Way, the northbound, the new bike path, beautiful. So I'd like to see projects when they're in their inception all the way to the end. And I just have to say, I watched the crew out there every day working, and it's beautiful. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. So I actually have a couple of questions about the list. There's the Olive and Magnolia Bridge Improvement Projects. It said these bridges are functionally obsolete and structurally deficient. And we know funding is needed, and Caltrans will provide some money for that, right?
There's two facets of the bridge program in the city. And I know that that's written as structurally deficient. That's written by a county inspection, and the score is just at the threshold of potentially being categorized as that. So I want to make sure everybody knows they're safe and they're not gonna, they're not impending to just collapse. It's a county kind of methodology and scoring, kind of similar to, I guess, maybe a PCI a little bit. But the annual program that this board saw of we put in $50,000 a year, and the county has, I believe it's federal and state money that they receive to maintain bridges throughout the county for the city. So we participate in that program. So there's the maintenance that's done to all of our bridges, and then the major rehabilitation or replacement of them is a whole different animal, whole different project.
Understood. The percentage of deficiency on that, what are the score of those two bridges?
I believe if there's a score of 70 being deficient, I'd have to look it up, but I think it was basically 70 or 69, like right on the bubble. So I wasn't, of course, here for the write-up, so that's my understanding of what's going on there.
Okay, well, I do want to also say that I'm probably the only one in the room that has actually built a bridge, and I know everything that goes into it and all the steel that's there holding it up. So I'm sure that it's safe for us to drive over. My concern would be when we do build these is to make sure the handrails are higher. I'm always concerned with children walking over these paths. I know the OSHA requirements for a handrail on a construction site is 42 inches, no more than 48. And I see a lot of these handrails on these bridges that are very, they're below that. They seem to be about 3 feet. So I know that's way ahead of time here, but I did want to make sure we got that on record. And the other question I had, did you like to? Yes, go ahead.
I love, as I mentioned earlier with board member Avazian, I love providing good news. So this board recommended the approval of a project to replace the rails on Olive and Magnolia with current standard rails. And that is a project that we have approved for the design phase this coming year. And to Member Jackson's comment, we are looking to secure grant money as well to get those done. So thank you for bringing that up.
Perfect. The other question is the Metrolink station rehabilitation. and the downtown Metrolink station rail crossing improvements. You probably covered this, but like Mr. Brennan said, remind me, doesn't Metro pay a portion of that as well?
Yes, so the Metro does pay portions of that. Actually, as far as the detail, I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Kriski to answer.
Yes, good evening, board members. David Kriski with the Community Development Department. In answer to your question, the Metrolink station itself is actually operated, owned, and maintained completely by the city of Burbank. It was built by the city of Burbank using transportation funds and I think redevelopment dollars about 20 years ago. Metrolink, the system, is different than Metro in that the host cities are responsible for the station. So that is an asset that the city needs to look after. And so that item in the unmet needs is identifying the fact that the station's about 20 years old. It's getting a little long in the tooth, and that we probably need to start thinking about a rehabilitation, a state of good repair effort to bring that station back up. The rail crossings are funded by other agencies, usually Metrolink or Metro, and we have an item on there acknowledging that those crossings are very kind of obsolete. They don't have the best of the safety improvements. And some good news there is that Metrolink is actually in the process of funding and planning for upgrades to those crossings as part of some of the Metrolink double track safety improvements that they're doing to beef up service on the Antelope Valley line. So it may be very well soon that we'll be able to take that item off the list because it will be funded potentially by outside money. But the station itself is definitely a city obligation.
Okay, understood. I like to hear that some of these items might fall off. Thank you for elaborating on that. Let's see. Make sure I have everything. The other thing I wanted to cover was infrastructure. So we know that we have, it's a percentage of a deficiency, but the bridges are still deficient, right? And it isn't just in our town, it's all around. So my thing would be is hopefully we can count on a good infrastructure bill that would help us fund some of these. The $500 million is an awful lot to be behind. And it would sure be great if we all would reach out and let our representatives know that we, as a city, really do need this funding. That would be the one thing that I would have to say. I think that's all I have on this item. Mr. Avazian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to see a little bit more specific detail. I don't want to go a lot on every single project, but for example, build new soccer fields. Can we know which parks, where are the locations, how many soccer fields?
Good question.
I think that's something that we can delve into once perhaps we have a high, medium, low priority, because this is a programmatic level, a high level view of the projects and project estimates that the department said they need. But we could definitely provide that detail at the appropriate time for the boards contemplate to move forward. I don't know those offhand, I guess is the answer right now. Ms. Garcia, our Parks and Recreation Director. I was trying to get you off the hook, but you put your camera on.
I'm good evening, Chair Coronado and board members. I'm Marissa Garcia with the Parks and Recreation Department. I'm happy to address this question. Currently, we don't have we've not identified a park. As most of you who live in Burbank know that we have limited space and all of our parks are heavily programmed and there isn't a lot of available open space to develop a soccer field or adequate soccer fields. The unfunded need to develop a soccer field is just that, right? Trying to find available land somewhere in the city to develop a soccer field. Currently, what we do have planned, and it's been partially funded through the infrastructure plan, is the renovation of Brace ball fields. And that is to convert those ball fields from a natural turf to artificial turf. And through that process, we hope to allow for more soccer activity. So when you have artificial fields, you can get more playability throughout the year. So that's kind of how we're trying to bridge that need on a short-term basis. Long-term basis, we're looking at any available land, whether it's over by the Golden State development area, Golden State Plan. Through that process, there is the Reservoir 1 up on the hillside that BWP renovated that reservoir. And long term, we could develop a park over that. That could be, again, super long term. Right now, I know our focus is to renovate our existing facilities before we add on new facilities. But I can definitely tell you that soccer is an unfunded a need in our community, and we're looking to try to meet that.
Madam Chair, quick question.
Yes.
With regards to the soccer fields, it's been a few years since I both coached and refereed soccer games, boys and girls. So most people use a lot of school property. Are you still doing that?
Yes, we do have. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Because there's a lot. They use a lot of numbers. Like the schools were always busy every weekend back in the day. It's just been a lot of years since I did that.
No, absolutely. So the city has. Yes, the city has a 50-year. Now we're probably into our 12th year of a 50-year joint use agreement with the school district where we share our facilities. So yes, we do have availability to use the school's fields primarily and facilities for recreational programming, and vice versa. They use our facilities for their needs as well.
Do we have any further questions? Mr. Jackson?
Just one final comment. I know we're about to lose Mr. Berkman. Once again, thanks for bringing this forward. My only, disagreement is the final recommendation, which I believe Mr. Vandenborg brought up, that, this shouldn't be just noted and filed. It should be an ongoing item where the board should be updated, if not quarterly, at least every, 6 months on the status of these unfunded projects. Are they ever going to, see the day of light, or are they going to be dropped out? So as said by Mr. Hahn, it's a living document, and we're still living. And so hopefully we'll be, informed as the process go forward. Thank you.
Yes, and point well taken. We will modify that for next month's meeting and going forward to make sure you and the public knows this is going to be considered throughout the year. Thank you.
Mr. Vanderboort?
Madam Chair, quick question for Mr. Kriski. Nice to see him with us. On those downtown ballers, and this is kind of the minutia, are these supposed to be removable ballers or automatic ballers that sort of sink into the street? Is that the $300,000?
Yes, so this was put forth by our economic development folks and part of our downtown bid. And the idea is to put the removable bollards or actuated bollards that reduce the need for traffic control when we need to close the street for events. So that's very expensive to put it up, with cones and stuff. So this would allow us to just put them up and have them there and be able to do street closures in downtown much more frequently.
I'd like that. It's a great idea. Those automatic ballers that retract into the street are like fantastic. I mean, they've had them for a long, long time all over the world. Thank you.
Member Vanderboort, I just did a project like that for my previous city. And it's a great example of something that when we get into the details, the automatic ballers are extremely costly, but that is something we would bring forward to you. We wound up installing the manual removable ballers that have nice stainless steel covers in that city's downtown. So it's a great example of the board will hear options and advise the council which way to go. So
Thank you.
good question.
Before you say something, Vanessa, I want to say I think we had a great discussion tonight, and I know that Mr. Berkman and I spoke to Ms. Takahashi. She had quite a few questions herself, so we'll reserve that for the next meeting, and that's the reason why we have it on the agenda, so we can continue to discuss this. Ms. Rochelle?
Yeah, an example of the manual, are they called ballers? Is that what they're called? Okay, so an example of the manual, are the ones in Santa Monica, for example, is that a good example?
I'm
Like Third Street
I'm not familiar with the ones in Santa Monica. I don't know if Mr. Krisky is or anybody else in staff.
Anybody? No?
They are kind of similar to Santa Monica, but the real bollards are kind of bollards that are crash rated that can withstand an impact. The ones on Santa Monica they're just a visual of a bollard. They don't.
No. So the ones they installed in Santa Monica because of the gentleman who, before they had them installed years ago, a person actually drove into the Third Street Promenade. I don't know if anybody remembers.
I do.
So then after that incident, then they installed them. So those are like a safety mechanism to not only keep traffic out, it's a safety mechanism. So that was actually something they did because of something that happened. That's what I'm saying. Is that a good example of the manual ones? Anybody?
Yeah, I can speak to the ones that we installed. They are bright yellow concrete, 110-pound bollards that we needed a pneumatic kind of dolly system to lift them out with two people and basically store them on a side hidden pad by a building. So manually wheel them in and out on, for this case, it was a farmer's market that occurred once a week.
Thanks.
So the automatic ones then would be stored in the ground, and then you push a button and they pop up, right?
Basically, and the reason they're so expensive is you can imagine the trench and the other infrastructure that's needed to be able to power those.
Understood.
Okay.
All right. Any further discussion on this item?
No.
All right. Like I said, great discussion tonight. I look forward to more of this.
Okay.
And now we move to the introduction of additional agenda items.
Madam Chair.
And yes, go right ahead.
Board members, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Avazian, you have an idea for a new agenda item?
I would like to discuss this project in more detail in the next meeting.
Okay. I think staff will note that. I know we have some time set aside for that, for Ms. Takahashi's questions. So I look forward to that discussion as well.
I'm sorry, can I get some clarification on that? When you're saying more detail, are you looking for more detail for all the projects or anything, any specific projects would you like for us to bring back more details for?
I would like to look at this in more detail. I have some questions that probably we need to either email you before the meeting if you can prepare the answers in the meeting. It will save a lot of time on the back and forth discussions, or we can prepare that and just ask during the meeting, whichever it's more convenient. Madam Chair, would you suggest to have this as a least email to the staff and through you and have this answered, or we can have another discussion?
Well, I think we could really go either way. what's the preference of staff? Would you rather have the questions ahead of time?
That would be extremely helpful because to try to get a detailed project scope for all these 58, that would be a pretty big task. So I think if you had a handful of projects that you actually would like more detail for, I think that's definitely more doable and manageable.
Perfect. Mr. Vanderboort?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know if it's possible to impose on Mr. Krisky and Ms. Garcia to join us again when we have this on the agenda next time. But they're able to answer these questions very quickly, kind of like the soccer thing. I mean, the soccer money has been around for 20 years and we don't have the land. And yes, we have a joint use agreement with the school district. So that answers our question. Or a question about ballers, Mr. Krisky can answer it fairly quickly. Not the specifics as to what we will do, but I think that's probably, Mr. Hunt, all the extent of the discussions. And you, from your department, you can answer questions about a specific, street improvement, or even if it is just a generic, yes, the $15 million for the I-5 improvements. It'll take us about 10 years to do this, or we need to get it done in 5 years because some of them are urgent. That kind of answer, I think, will help us prioritize, or at least give you some feedback on prioritizing without you having to prepare a report on 50 items.
That would be great, actually. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, so I have one, and that is what process does a contractor go through to become eligible to bid on the projects of the city of Burbank? That's my request for a future agenda item.
That's a good question.
What process? I'm not sure because Lisa, how much can I actually comment on this now?
Well, I mean, I think we may need a little clarification on what you mean by that, because our process to select contractors is an open and public competitive bidding process. So, Chair Coronado, can you clarify further what you mean by what process you're looking at?
Sure. So how does a contractor get into that pool of eligible bidders, I guess? And so what do they have to go through to show that they're a reputable contractor? I spoke with Mr. Berkman about this, I think via email. Or no, actually him and I had a meeting to discuss when I spoke at the city council, and I brought that up to him then, that I would hope that we could show how does a contractor, how do we show that a contractor is reliable? What their track record? Go ahead, Mr. Brennan. You want to add to it?
Yeah, from my experience, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, it's the qualifications like what level of can they amount of money they can bid on. They have a bond capability is usually what they're looking at, and what kind of track record. And if there's like different kinds of material they're going to be using in the project, will the material manufacturers stand behind their work? So they have to have a track record on, depending on the type of work you're talking about doing. Are we building a building? Are we putting in new windows? Are we putting in new doors? What's the concept of the project? Or like paving the street. Can they buy the materials? Are they qualified to buy the materials? What kind of bond can they get? So it's somewhat complicated, but not too much. But that's usually what you're looking for. And a track record, of course. How have they been around? And of course, then again, especially for city projects, it probably helps if they're a union contractor to bid the job, because it's not just a prevailing wage project, usually, whatever they pay. They've got to meet a certain standards. Because you're a union yourself, that's just what do they call them? Regular guys, people who are qualified, not the new guys, the people that are, I can't think of the word now. But
Yeah, I
generally
couldn't think of it
speaking,
either.
what kind of work is there?
Correct. So that we don't get into a full-on discussion at tonight's meeting. Would it be helpful if staff works to bring back an item that goes into a little bit more of an overview of the contractor selection process? I know we've talked a lot about how a project is delivered, and we've gone through, the planning and the design phase and getting up to actual construction, but perhaps we can do maybe a general overview of how we actually select a contractor. And again, it will be general because it's project specific, but would that help to inform
That would probably help a lot, yeah.
the discussion?
Especially if, talking about like general contractors and what their specialties are and what does the project.
Right. Madam Chair, does that sound like what you're asking for?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be very helpful.
Thank you for helping with that, Mr. Brennan. I was at a loss for words there for a minute.
I understand.
All right. So any further pending agenda items? Anything on the list here you'd like to see brought forward or prioritized? All right. Seeing none, it looks like we're moving to adjournment. So our next scheduled meeting will be on June 24th, 2021 at 6 p.m.
Madam
We'll
Chair.
still be on Zoom.
Madam Chair, I think Mr. Avazian had something to add.
Oh, go right ahead, sir. Sorry about that.
Item. I would like to know what is the Public Works Department's PR, public outreach regarding the construction project. What's the procedure, notifying the residents about the project that's going on, the construction around their house, close their house in the neighborhood? Including if there's a website updates, social media, door hangers, notifications, community meetings, anything possible.
I'll second that to be added to the future agenda items. In general, have a broad discussion about how it is that we can better communicate with the public for ongoing immediate projects.
Good idea.
That might fall into when proposals, you're getting the word out to new contractors for a project. That ties into that too, doesn't it? So maybe we could tie that into the projects and how we announce a new project to prospective contractors.
Yes.
As well as the public?
I was just going to suggest perhaps we combine those two items because they both relate to the actual construction process. And so if that makes sense, we can add that to a future agenda.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see any more suggestions. So I'm moving to adjourn, and our next scheduled meeting will be June 24th at 6 p.m. via video conference.
Okay.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.